So this is Jade, our angel, our light to Stalker's dark. Now this video will have nothing quest related in it. I will have a separate video for that, of course marked with spoilers. But Jade is very interesting. She has a lot going on and a very interactive ability set. Bloody hard to kill when she's in her glory on high ability, combined with mods like Aviator and Aerodynamic equipped as well. She is pretty powerful. She can strip defenses, she can nuke, she can heal, she can revive from distance, and she can slow enemies. But she honestly isn't as powerful as we first thought she was going to be when they showed her off on that dev stream showcase, but I'll go over that in a bit. So how do you get your hands on Jade? How do you farm her and her pieces? On completion of the Jade Shadows quest, you will get Jade's blueprint, and trust me, the quest is definitely worth it. Short, but bloody good. To get her chassis, her helmet and her systems, you will have to farm the new Ascension game mode on the mission node Brutus, which is on Uranus. It's basically the new mission type with the clan event. Now the event has got a pity system where you will earn vestigial motes for running the mission, and you can then spend these motes at Ordis in Larunda Relay on Mercury. If you don't know where Ordis is, just bring up your gear wheel and fast travel to him from that. Now this is his store on screen. It is 150 motes per piece of Jade, and then 300 for each of her weapons, not to mention the arcanes as well. Now you can also buy just her on her own for platinum, or you can buy her bundle, completely up to you if you want to, I guess, fast track that grind if you're too busy with work, college or real life. But let's just jump into Jade and check out her abilities. Now her passive is called the Anointed. This will give her 2 aura mod slots, making modding her so much easier. 2 aura slots means increased mod capacity, but her passive also applies judgments with some of her abilities, meaning her first and her fourth have a chance per hit to apply a judgment to enemies as well. This is basically a debuff which will increase enemy damage vulnerability by a whopping 50% at max for 10 seconds at base. They will then take increased damage. So the sword symbols that you will see above enemies' heads as they run around is that judgment debuff. Now her first ability is called Light's Judgment. Jade will create a well of light that will heal teammates and hurt enemies that step into it. Enemies who get caught in it are then also debuffed by the judgment. The damage is pretty low of this ability, but the heal is quite nice. Now the main use I found for this ability is to spread those judgments around as much as you can so that I can then explode them with her fourth ability. And you can throw down 5 of these Light's Judgments at any given time, so you can do plenty of choke points, and especially if you can get a really nice choke point in a hall or on a staircase, this works incredibly well with her fourth ability when you start detonating those enemies. But its radius is pretty low, and in my opinion could maybe do with a little bit of a buff because range mods don't affect the radius of Light's Judgment. Now her second ability is called Symphony of Mercy. Jade can cycle through 3 enchanting songs that buffs her and her teammates, and killing enemies surrounded by judgments will extend the duration of these buffs. Now the 3 buffs are Power of the 7, which will increase your ability strength, like a better growing power if you will. My build has a bonus 71% to that extra power strength. The next buff is Deathbringer, which will increase your weapon damage. Now, my weapon buff is over 300%, which works brilliantly with her fourth, her exalted weapon. The other buff is the Spirit of Resilience, which will boost your shield regen and reduce your shield regen delay. Now, between using the power strength one, the Power of the 7, and of course the Deathbringer buff, which is the weapon buff, I've really not had any need for the shield one, especially with Aviator and Aerodynamic on my Jade when she's in the air, so the shield one doesn't really apply to me. It might apply to you. However, moving on, her third ability is Orphanum Eyes. For this, Jade summons eyes that will float beside her that slow nearby enemies and strip their shields and their armor. This works in a 70-degree frontal cone, and it can slow enemies up to 90% while stripping defenses at 10% per second at base. That 10% per second is going to increase with power strength. I think mine is up to 27% strip per second, meaning full strip in just over 3 seconds. And I think that's at just under or just around 300% power strength as well. Now, this ability also burns enemies in heat damage, but the damage is really minimal. Moving on to her ultimate ability, which is Glory on High. Now, with Glory on High, Jade takes to the skies and gains an exalted weapon called Glory, which is a heat-based sidearm that shoots rounds that will explode in a 2-meter radius on impact but with its alt fire, it also detonates any enemy under the effect of that judgment debuff in a 4-meter radius, but that's increased if the enemy affected is already standing inside the radius of her first ability, which is Light's Judgment, making the explosion even more powerful. So it has synergy between her 1 and her 4, meaning you can prime with her 1 and you can detonate enemies with the 4, like the good old days of Anthem, I guess, or Mass Effect. Now, Glory on High also gives her a 50% damage reduction at maximum amount, and a 10% chance to debuff someone with a judgment whenever she shoots one of them with her Glory weapon. Now, I'm going to be honest, with 50% damage reduction from her fort ability while she's in the air, and then the Aviator mod and the Aerodynamic mod, or even just with one of them, while also using adaptation on top of that, is a little bit overkill, but that's pretty much what we do in Warframe, right? We do overkill when it comes to how much damage she can soak up. But the explosion damage from her Glory weapon is also really, really nice once you have a big chunk of enemies primed. And if you're using blast damage on that weapon as well, which it changes to blast, enemies are pretty much just going to evaporate. Now, you could subsume off her third ability, which is the defense strip one, if you wanted something that's a little bit faster in the form of stripping enemy defenses, like maybe Pillage, which will also give you Overshield back in return. It works amazingly well. I've got 3 different configs right now. I've got the default one with no subsume. My second one has Pillage, which works really, really well. And then the third one was just one for grounded to see what she was like while not in the air. And I didn't enjoy that at all. So I've kind of decided that I like her as she is without any subsume on her. Now, this is my build for Jade. Remember, this is mine. It works for me. Feel free to mod however the hell you want, depending on what mods you have or what mods you don't have, what arcanes you have, what arcanes you don't have. Remember, it is your game, your frame. Go nuts. Now, since I'm focusing on her ultimate and her first ability, I've modded for corrosive rejection in order to speed up the armor strip, while popping in Aerodynamic and the Aviator for more damage reduction on top of the 50% from her fort ability, because overkill. Then I've got Blind Rage, Umbral Intensify for strength, with the Molt Augmented Arcane for more power strength. Then I've got Streamline, Flow, and Equilibrium for energy, since her efficiency in this build is at a negative. Adaptation for more damage mitigation, and Archon Vitality to give me extra heat procs, since her abilities are mostly heat based. Now, Umbral Vitality would also pop in here if you don't want to use the Archon one. Arcane Energize is also another arcane that I'm using simply because free energy is going to keep me and keep Jade in the air even longer. If you don't have prime mods, use the normal ones. If you don't have this form of energy regen, use whatever is at your disposal. Now, when it came to modding her exalted weapon Glory, this is what I settled for. Hornet Strike or faction mod of choice, whichever you prefer. Viral Radiation and the weapon's base heat damage as the 3 status effects I'm going to be spreading. Galvanized Shot for Condition Overload, which is going to benefit from that viral radiation and heat. And then I've got Primed Target Cracker. Or you could drop the radiation mod out for Creeping Bullseye. Now that I look at it, maybe that's what I should do, but it's going to slow my fire rate. Oh, I also have 3 separate Tau Forge shards on my Jade. I've got 2 red ones for power strength and I've got a yellow one for casting speed. And if you don't want to mod for viral and heat, then you could mod for blast, because blast right now is incredible. It has changed with this update. Now, instead of giving enemies inaccuracy, it will detonate those enemies instead whenever you deal a blast status effect. So, upon inflicting a blast status effect, individual stacks will cause a mini explosion, and at maximum stack count of 10 will inflict combined damage in a 5-meter radius. This explosion happens after 1.5 seconds. If it's an individual blast proc, then it will deal a percentage of that initial damage that you've dealt, and if it's a full blast stack of 10 stacks, then it will deal over 100% of base inflicted damage in a large radius. So basically, it's additional chain explosions. You can combine your blast explosions from the status effect with Glory's explosions to chain even more explosions onto enemies that hopefully have no armor, which means they're going to evaporate almost immediately. So that's pretty much Jade. She is our angelic force to be reckoned with. She is a support frame. She is an attack-based warframe. She's hard to kill, but she is not as powerful as we thought she was going to be. Hell, I'd maybe say that her 1 and her 4 could do with some minor buffs to range for the 1 and maybe power for the 4, but maybe I'm just being a little bit more overkill. Let me know what you think of Jade. Have a great day, have a great week, and as always, thanks for watching.